Hi, Math 2 students, and welcome to your 5.7 Ed Puzzle. So let's go ahead and get started. It says there are 5 properties of a parallelogram. Let's go ahead and list them. So first off, what is a parallelogram? A parallelogram looks like this minus the crisscross in the middle. So basically you've got a top, you've got a bottom, and it'll look something like this. Now this isn't perfect, but I did do my best. So the 5 properties you're going to need to know are that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. The next one is that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So I guess I should probably explain what these mean. So the first one is that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So what that means is that this side is parallel to this side, and that this side, wow, there's like no change in color, is parallel to that side. Then both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. What that means is that this side is congruent to that side, and that this side is congruent to that side. All right. Next, it says both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Oops. So what that means is that this angle is congruent to that angle, and that this angle is congruent to that angle. The next property is that consecutive angles are supplementary. And what that means is that this angle here would be supplementary to this angle. This angle here would be supplementary to this angle. And also, I guess, we could say that this angle would be supplementary to this angle. This angle would be supplementary to this angle. So basically, consecutive means kind of like, you know, if you're going around in a circle, consecutive would be next to each other. All right. And of course, supplementary means they add up to 180. Then it's that the diagonals bisect each other. So what that means is that if I were to draw in diagonals here, that means that this guy is congruent to that guy because he is bisected, and that this guy is congruent to that guy because he is bisected. All right. So let's go ahead and answer some of these questions. It says, given that HJKL is a parallelogram, answer the following questions. So it says JK is parallel to what? So we have JK here. What line does JK have to be parallel to? Well, that's going to be HL, and that's because we know that the opposite sides are parallel. So we could say HL. Then it says LK is congruent to what? So LK is this guy here. What is LK going to be congruent to? That's going to be HJ. And how do we know that? Well, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So these are opposite sides. They're going to be congruent because it's a parallelogram. So LK is going to be congruent to HJ. Then we have angle LHJ. All right, so they want to know which angle is this going to be congruent to. And we know from up here that pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So that means that it's going to be congruent to this angle here. So we'll say angle LKJ. Then they say angle LKH is going to be congruent to what angle? So this is actually very important here. We know that parallelograms have opposite sides parallel, right? So, oops, let's see if I can kind of move that here. If you think back to what we've worked on previously, right? If these two lines are parallel and we have this transversal, we are going to have some congruent angles. One obvious one is going to be the alternate interior. Oh my God, maybe I should do it the... Whoops, sorry, I drew that wrong. That's the alternate interior, my bad. So we know alternate interior angles are congruent for parallel lines, and we got parallel lines here. So we can go ahead and say LKH is going to be congruent to JHK. So that is applying those, angle properties that we learned about. Next, we have MK. So what is MK going to be congruent to? Well, we know that diagonals bisect each other. So LJ is a diagonal here. Well, that means it's going to bisect this entire thing here, right? So that means it cuts it in half. So this guy is going to be congruent to that guy. So MK is going to be congruent to HM. And next we have angle KJL. So we have KJL. That's this guy here, and we want to know what that's congruent to. So again, we're going to apply the idea that we've got some... Why is this not working so terribly for me here? There we go. So we're going to apply that idea that we got two parallel lines. That was a weird inflection. Cut by a transversal. And this is going to be our transversal here. Beautiful. So if we look, we have, again, alternate interior angles. So we know that KJL is going to be congruent to HLJ. Beautiful. Next, it says if angle HLK, so we actually have that drawn in here. We have HLK is 82. Oh, no, we don't. I lied. We have HLJ drawn in. So we have angle HLK here. We know this guy is 82. They want us to find the angle of LHJ. So LHJ, we want to know what this guy is. So we also learned that consecutive angles are supplementary. These are consecutive angles, right? If I was going around in a circle, they're right next to each other. So they are supplementary, so we could say that 82 plus angle LHJ has to equal 180. Angle LHJ is going to be 180 minus 82, which is going to give us 98 degrees. Very cool. All right. So now it says find the value of each variable. Awesome. So I guess one thing that probably should be in these directions is stating that these figures are parallelograms. You can't assume that something's a parallelogram unless it's told you. So maybe let's just even add that in there, assuming the given figures are parallelograms. Okay, so we're assuming that these are parallelograms. Now we know that parallelograms have opposite sides congruent. So we know that this side is congruent to this side, and we know that this side is congruent to this side. So let's go ahead, let's start with the y's here. We're going to say 5y minus 12 equals 3y plus 8. So go ahead and solve that for me. So you should be able to bring the 3y over. You get 2y minus 12 equals 8 plus 12. You get 2y equals 20. y equals 10 is what you should have gotten. Then let's go ahead and do the x's. So again, these x's are congruent, so we can set them equal to each other. So we're going to say 7x minus 4 equals 4x plus, excuse me, 4x plus 5. So now let's go ahead and solve. Tell me what you get for x. So you should get, you can bring this minus 4x over. You get 3x minus 4 equals 5, plus 5, or plus 4, goodness. So you get 3x equals 9, divided by 3, x equals 3. Beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and try another one. So for number 9, you can see here about what kind of angles they're giving us. So again, assuming this is a parallelogram, we've got opposite angles, all right? Those are the angles across from each other diagonally. And it says opposite angles are congruent. So what do you think we want to do with these angles? Do you think we're going to set them equal to each other? Do you think we're going to add them up equal to add them up, set them equal to 180, add them up, set them equal to 90? What do you think we're going to do here? So since opposite angles are congruent, we're going to set them equal to each other. So we're going to say 8x minus 4 equals 3x plus 6 minus 3x. And we get 5x minus 4 equals 6 plus 4. We get 5x equals 10. We get x equals 2. Then for this next one, these are called consecutive angles, right? Because if you're going around in a circle, they're next to each other. And we learned up here that consecutive angles are supplementary. So knowing that, what do you think we're going to do with these angles? Are we going to set them equal to each other, add them up to equal 90, add them up to equal 180? What are we going to do with these angles? So since they're supplementary, we are going to add them up and set them equal to 180. So we're going to say 7x plus 10 plus 3x plus 5 equals 180. We can combine like terms. We get 10x plus 15 equals 180 minus 15. 180 minus 15 is 165. Which is going to give us 16.5. Why does that feel wrong? I don't know. Let me just double check this. Usually we don't get decimals, so I just want to make sure I didn't make an error. Looks like we're good to go. So we do get a decimal there. I just wanted to make sure. All right, cool. So now let's try number 11. So we got a lot going on here. All right. So first, this is, again, we're assuming parallelogram. Opposite sides are congruent. So we can go ahead and set those equal to each other. And then we can go ahead and solve that. We get 3y minus 2 equals 13. Plus 2 to both sides, we get 3y equals 15. We get y equals 5. Then we're looking, okay, well, we've got the two diagonals, and we know that the diagonals bisect each other. So that means that this line is going to cut the other line in half. So this guy is congruent to that guy. So since they're congruent, we can set them equal to each other. So we're going to say 6x plus 9 equals 10x plus 5. We'll do minus 6x minus 6x. We get 4x plus 5 equals 9. Minus 5, we get 4 equals 4x. X equals 1. Making progress. All right. So now let's try number 12 here. So what we can do is we've got two separate angles here. right? And first I'm looking, and it's a little bit tricky, not gonna lie, but the first thing I would want to do is I'd want to try to come up with an equation that only involves one variable, because I've got 3 different variables here, which is pretty tricky. So what I'm gonna do here is I've got these 2 guys. I look in their diagonal. All right, so I want you to tell me, what is the relationship between these 2 angles that I've drawn in? Are they congruent? Are they supplementary, complementary? What are they? So they are diagonals, which means that they're congruent, so we can set them equal to each other. So we've got 4x minus 13 equals 2x plus 15. Minus 2x, we get 2x minus 13 equals 15. Add 13 and we get 28 equals 2x. X equals 14. Next, we've kind of got different routes we can take. We know what x is, so let's go ahead, let's plug it in for one of these. I'm going to try and figure out what this angle is. So I'm going to do 4 times 14 minus 13. 4 times 14 minus 13 gives me 43. So that means that this angle here is going to be equal to 43 degrees. Now, I want you to think about the relationship between this angle and this angle. Are they congruent? Are they complementary? Are they supplementary? So these are consecutive angles, and consecutive angles are supplementary. So what we can do is we could say, well, 43 plus 10y minus 3 equals 180. And we can go ahead and solve that. And when you solve that, you do get that y is 14. All right. Now again, there's different ways we can solve for z. I could either solve for this angle. I could plug in 14, and I know that this angle has to be congruent to this angle because they're diagonal. Or I could kind of do the same setup, and since these guys are consecutive angles, I could say 43 plus z equals 180. Those are different ways to do this. I'm just going to do the 43 plus z equals 180 because I think that's less work. And then I get z equals 137. All right, as you can see, there's a lot of different rules we're going to have to know how to apply here. All right, let's go ahead and finish this up. So it says, given that ABCD is a parallelogram, find the measures. So they want to know the measure of BC. So let's see, we've got BC here. Well, we know that this side is congruent to this side because they are opposite sides. So that means that BC has to be 18. Then they want to know AB. Well, we know that this side is congruent to this side. So if that's 24, AB has to be 24. Now they want to know the measure of EB. That's this guy here. Well, like we've said before, the 2 diagonals bisect each other, which means that this guy is congruent to this guy. So DE is congruent to EB, so it's going to be 13. I guess I should be using units, right? They're all centimeters. And then they want to know DB. DB. Oh, okay. So they're just, DB is this whole thing, right? So you would just do 13 plus 13, since they're both 13, and you would get 26. All right, next we're dealing with some angles here. So they want to know the measure of angle BDC. So BDC is this guy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in the parallel lines of interest here. We've got a parallel line here. We've got a parallel line here, and we've got a transversal. All right, and this is the angle that we're interested in. Well, if you notice, they gave us the measure of this angle, which is 20. Those are alternate interior angles, which are congruent, so this guy's got to be 20 degrees. Next, they want to know DAB. So DAB, I'm going to erase all this other nonsense I wrote in here. DAB is this guy here. And we learned that opposite angles are congruent, so DAB has to be 126. Next is ABC. So ABC, they want to know the measure of this entire angle here. And we know that consecutive angles are supplementary. So this guy and this guy need to be supplementary. So we could do 180 minus 126, and we're going to get 54. All right, then we've got DBC. So let's draw that in. Nope, that doesn't really help, does it? So that's DBC. Well, we figured out that this whole thing is 54. And if this guy's 20, we're just going to do 54 minus 20, which is going to give us 34 degrees.